about CE5 and extraterrestrial contact, download my new book, now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, and 14 other platforms. Book authored by Donald Ledesma. CE5, Frequencies of Contact.
What's up, everybody? This is Osborne, and you're listening to the Alien Strand podcast with Donald Ledesma. My new project EP, Takeoff, will be available everywhere music is sold very soon. You can keep up to date with me at facebook.com/OsborneLid and on Instagram at OsborneLid with 3 T's. See you there.
I got them skiing through the snow and now they're getting stuck. I'm on some new shit this year with my Cybertruck.
Everybody, welcome to this episode of Alien Strand Podcast. I'm your host, Don Ledesma, and welcome to today's show. It's going to be an interesting one. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But, I haven't talked to you guys in a little while. I know, just been busy. I'm a busy guy, working with my films and just doing some changes, a little bit of changes in life. But, hey, it happens. And, still working on the films. The last film is on pause right now, all right? So I know you guys are waiting for it, but, it is what it is. Sometimes I have to kind of stop and wait for some extra footage to come through in order to make that happen, right? Because, I want you guys to see a good product and something good that's to be learned from Alien Strand Podcast and from Extraterrestrial Life and Contact, and then everybody that's involved with Contact, right? So we want to make sure that you guys have a great experience watching it on your television set, right? Because that's where you're going to be seeing it. Usually it's going to be on Amazon Prime, just like the other films, right? The middle part 1, part 2, and part 3 are on Amazon Prime. Go check them out there, or you can find them on Awesome or Fossum TV. I'm sorry, FAWESOME, Fossum TV. You can download that on your Roku and search the middle. The middle part 2 is on there as well. Both of those films are there, and part 3 is only on Amazon Prime. As far as and with the other films as well. All right, so you can check those out there. I really appreciate each and every one of you guys for downloading the films and really enjoying the content that we were putting out there. Now you can catch our audio podcast on 28, 29 platforms. We're all over the place. iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Deezer, Castbox, you name it. We're out there. Amazon. You can even ask Alexa. She'll play some Alien Strand Podcast. Yes, that's what you want to do, right? So anyway, it's we try to get as much information as possible to you guys on ufology, because this is what it's about, ufology. And if you guys are learning ufology, welcome to ufology, because that's what Alien Strand Podcast is about, ufology. We're here to learn and to learn you a little bit. That's right. That's right. We have to kind of get things going, right? As it is, right? So anyway, I was on this television show. Oh, not television. I'm sorry. I was on this radio show in Oregon last week, and it was a very it was Monday. Oh, wow. Where's my brain? Hello. It was this past Monday, and It was an amazing podcast. Actually, it wasn't a podcast. It was an actual live radio show, FM radio, right? I've never been on one of those before. That was actually my first one, right? As far as be able to talk to somebody and people actually out there in the Oregon area that were actually listening to the show, right? Because that's and the show was called the Fenton Perspective, right? And she's been on the radio for about, 28 years or so, and she's been doing this a long time. She was an amazing host, right? And we got to make some really good contact, as far as the show, and we had a great conversation. And if you missed it, well, it might be on there. Go to let's see, I think it's, what is it? Rock Radio or something like that. Anyway, I'll put the links to the radio station, and just look for the Fenton Perspective. Go check that out, and you'll see the archive. The last one, I believe it was on the 24th when I was on, and it's about a 2-hour show. So if you got time, go listen to it. It's a great show, man. We talked some really good, deep stuff about ufology, man, because and just the things of the unknown. That's what it is, right? And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because we never get to brush up on the actual meanings of everything sometimes, right? And we have to really find out exactly what these meanings are, as far as like the CE categories that are out there. And we try to I know I talk about those a lot, the CE categories, and we try to make people understand what each one category is, right? And I'm going to break it down just a little bit. So of course, the CE1, when they say CE1, and this was all made by the Project Blue Book, and he categorized all the CE factors: CE1, CE2, CE3, CE4, and CE5, right? This was by Hynek, right? And of course, this is in my book as well. You heard the commercial at the very beginning. You can always go back and look at the book. I think it's page 11, 12, somewhere on there. So anyway, you can find the information on the CE, the definitions, because that's what this little booklet I wrote is. A booklet, really, in reality, and a guide to show you how to do CE5 contact, right? So, when we talk about CE1, it's a visual sighting of a UFO at close range, right? It's probably around, they say, visual, which is close to about 500 feet, right? And the sighting, you got to make sure that you observe that the appearance, the size, shape, color, movement, or any kind of patterns like that, right? Especially if it's got structured light, off light patterns, in other words, where it doesn't blink like a helicopter or a standard airplane, which is 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. It's going to have a really off pattern. That's when you know that it's not from this world, because they try to mimic a lot of these crafts up there. They try to look like airplanes and they look like helicopters, and they kind of mimic the light positioning of these crafts to make it look like an aircraft, but their lighting patterns can never be the same. They don't know how to mimic that. I don't know why. I don't know why, but this is how I usually identify a video from a actual craft or an airplane, anything that we have human made, right? So and it's just that the CE1 is just basically, it's just going to be a direct visual contact. And that's what a CE1. So in other words, if you've seen a UFO, you've had a CE1. Yeah. So, and then we have a CE2, which is a close encounters of the second kind, right? So that's usually, it's beyond the sighting, right? So it's more of a physical, right? It kind of, it has the associated associated presence of like a electronic magnetic field, right, where you can kind of feel the effects of the interference, or like if your car or your truck or whatever. Remember the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Well, when the radio shut off in his vehicle and he kind of floated, while it was going up in the air, and that's pretty much a Close Encounters of the Second Kind. It pretty much breaks it down into right there, right? When you saw that scene in that film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that's basically what it is, right? And you have some like devices that are interrupting with the communication, your stereo, your vehicle turns off, things like that. And it does happen. Usually in close proximity to CE2, most people's phones will die. Yes, the battery actually dies on the cell phone, And that's why you always see a lot of short videos, right? And it kind of upsets me too, because it's like, man, I want to see a longer one, right? A longer video. And why don't we always, I had those trolls all over Alien Strand Podcast on the Facebook, and they would all say the same thing. How come it's always a short video? You know, and it would upset me too, but, you know, it's like, it is what it is, because they had a CE2 a lot of times. And it even happened in the late 90s when we were having these camcorders that people were buying. The battery would die. They would only get like maybe a minute or two, and then the battery would die on these camcorders. It did happen that way, right? So, and that's what a CE2 is. So, and then we go to the next category, which is a close encounters of the third kind, right? In other words, you have like involvement or some kind of direct communication with an extraterrestrial being or the occupants inside the vehicle. In other words, like if they looked at you, you looked at it, and you waved and it waved back at you, or it kind of gave you a nod or whatever. You know, that is the close encounters of the third kind, right? And it has to be associated with the pilot or the extraterrestrial, whatever is inside that craft. Now, it can actually go to, and now that we've noticed that we see more and more people talking to the craft as it's in the air. We tell it go left, and it goes left, go right, it goes right. To me, that's pretty close to that category, right? You're in between a 2 and a 3 at that point. And that's what I'm starting to see, which has been happening more and more now. In other words, that because I always talk about the communication of the UFO and how we are the antenna, and it starts connecting with you, and then you have your awakening moment. Well, yeah, that's exactly what happens, right? But with a close encounters of the third kind, you start getting more emotional. You start having more of an awakening. You start getting more of kind of a spiritual, philosophical sort of awakening in your psyche, right? In your mind, everything starts opening up for you. Things start looking different, right? I don't know, but it kind of like as you get older, as I am getting older, it feels like, they always say as you get older, you get wiser. Yes, that is a true statement, because you start living life and start experiencing things more than the person before you. Right? So, in other words, younger than you, as a kid or whatever. So you get to give them good, advice as we get older. But at the same time, you're having a sort of an epiphanies, awakening moments as well. It's almost the same way, but with a UFO craft, different things happen. It's just like something opens up inside your brain, and you start seeing things bigger and better and brighter sometimes. And sometimes things, it just doesn't seem so bad after all, right? And then you start wondering, wow, I guess, I misunderstood life. You start having those kind of thoughts when you have a close encounters of the third kind, right? And that's really a strong connection with a lot of people with that when they have that. And that's in a lot of my films, right? Because people end up getting that as well because they're in between a 2 and a 3. Now, close encounters of the fourth kind, it's actual direct and interactions with extraterrestrial beings as far as like, experiencing going on board the craft, right? So you're talking walking on the craft, experiencing everything that is part of the actual full encounter, right? In other words, having to see the visual physical things of the craft inside of the craft, right? As you're watching the lights blinking, the chairs, the tables, you're seeing everything as you're awake, or you're having like telepathic communications, right? And that's what I talked about in the live radio show. We talked about how telepathic communications, how I was able to understand that now, just through a dream and through an encounter that I had the night before, right? And I was able to understand how that sounds. As strange as that sounds, it did happen to me, right? In a different sense. But I was able to experience that. And she even told me, have you ever been hypnotized before or going under? And I was like, no. She goes, you might want to do that because I think you probably got abducted. I'm like, well, maybe. A lot of strange things happened after that, but that's the CE4, right? When you actually have all those interactions with the actual pilot or ET, or just being on board craft, or just going under for them to do like medical tests or any kind of examinations on you, right? As you're under their kind of spell, right? Let's just say they put you under this trance of where you can't move anymore, right? And we've talked about that a lot. When you get a PTSD afterwards, after you the whole thing is done and over with, and you're back at home, you end up getting that, and it's because of the understanding of what exactly happened. So you do have some sort of visual imagination of exactly what transpired or what occurred to you during that whole process, right? And that's what a lot of people do experience in that, and sometimes they'll get false memories, every once in a while, or they'll get some kind of sleep disorders. And all this happens because of the actual encounter and being under the duress. The human body goes under the full duress of the full encounter, right? So in how do we fix that? We kind of don't, right? It's just, you have to go through it. You have to go through it all the way, right? And then we have to find ways to fix that. And that's where Alien Strand comes in. That's where a lot of these other podcasts come into, where you can explain exactly what happened. And it kind of helps alleviate the whole process of exactly what took place, what transpired, and everything that you experience under that duress, if you were under that duress. Not everybody is, but it does happen. It does happen to people from time to time, right? So, and then, of course, last but not least, we have Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, right, which is the highest level of the intentional communication when the contact with extraterrestrial civilizations, right? So in other words, using a higher consciousness based on methods and protocols, right? In other words, like these encounters, when they involve telepathic communication with visual sightings of UFOs, and like they respond to human signals, cooperative interactions between humans and non-human intelligence. In other words, you can, let's just say, you really open up and you connect with these extraterrestrials, with the craft, everything that comes with it, right? In other words, they literally open your mind up, like unlock everything that's been locked up for all this time, right? Of course, we've always talked about how the processed foods, the everything, the fluoride that's in the water, everything like that clouds the memory, right? And it kind of brings down your mental thoughts, right? And the openness of everything, right? Especially when you're having these awakening moments. When you have this awakening, I'm gonna get kind of deep here, but when you do have these awakening moments, your mind, you don't want to eat these processed foods anymore. You don't want to be drinking this nasty water that's coming straight out of the tap. You want to start drinking more spring water, things like that, some things that are more natural, because you want to experience the whole awakened moments, or the awakenedness of your psyche in full spectrum, right? You want it in full spectrum. So, and you don't want anything to cloud it up. It's almost like, being under drugs, or let's just say you drink a lot of alcohol or whatever. Your mind is cloudy all the time. You don't have a straight focus on everything that's happening around you. So this is what I'm trying to say as far as that. Once you have that awakening moment, you don't want to be doing those things anymore. It changes your whole habits, because you want to experience more of the world, see things and experience the frequencies of the earth and frequencies of everyone, and even contact with regular human beings, but good people. You want to be around that. You start changing a lot of ways of thinking, and your habits, your old habits go away. Let's just put it to you that way. And which is a great thing. That's a great thing. You can't beat that with a stick, right? And that's what they always used to say. Even the old timers just say it all the time. Hey, let's take a quick break. Let's pay the bills here. We'll be back in just a minute.
Alien Strand Podcast.
All right, welcome back. Thank you for listening to Alien Strand Podcast. Don't forget to go to all my links there. Click on Patreon. Join Patreon for free. Go check it out there. It would go a long way if you would be a $5 subscriber. That's all we ask for. Please go over there and go to a Patreon, and that would help keep this whole podcast and everything that goes around here going for a longer period of time if you enjoy everything and all the information that's coming out of here. All right. So let's go ahead and move forward, right? So we're talking about the CE5 and the awakeness of everything that's been happening to folks that go through all these steps of CE1 all the way through CE5. If some people don't get to go all the way through, they just experience CE1. Most people, it's just a CE1, CE2. That's about as far as you're going to get, right? And CE3 is the least common and 4, but it does happen, right? All that does happen to people over time. You know, sometimes within a 10-year, 15-year span of nothingness, right? In other words, nothing will happen in between that time. Then all of a sudden, bam, you get hit with it again. So, and I guess they just know when to contact you or when it's time, right? And that's just the way some of these extraterrestrial craft. So I'm talking not the nasty ones, not the ones that treat people horribly or whatever. Some of them just want to be observers, right? And that's basically what they are. They are the observers. We are the zoo. So, and you have to kind of think of it that way, right? Because like I've talked about many, many times before, if we go to Mars, the same thing. We're going to be dropping drones everywhere. We are going to be the observers of everything around that planet before we can say, okay, let's go ahead and just try to make this ours or whatever. Now, the extraterrestrials, they don't want this planet. They don't want to do that. If they would have wanted it, they would have took it a long time ago. So I think they're just kind of observers in the whole situation, you know, probably just taking plants or maybe some species with them or fish, maybe, I don't know. And they could be taking any kind of animals. We know they took humans, that's for sure. So, you know, maybe it's just something that they're doing, you know. It kind of reminds me of the movie, the First Planet of the Apes in 1970s, right? With Charlton Heston, right? It just, they put people in cages, because we were the zoo. The humans were the zoo, and the apes were the species that controlled the planet, right? So basically, it's like that in a sense, but they're not going to control our planet. They're just kind of watching us from afar, and that's how I'm seeing it. That's how I've been trying to explain it to so many people. And if you listen to this podcast, if you've been listening to this podcast for a long time, this is exactly what it is, right? And like I said, I try to explain it the best way I can in these kind of circumstances, right? And they're not always going to fall in the same way, right? So there's just a lot going on. Now let's get into a little bit of our story. I just want to talk about it just a little bit, and it's a story that happened in Syracuse, Sicily, in Italy, and this happened in May 19th, 1960, right? So the story goes here is that it was like a dark night in May 19th, 1960, okay? This gentleman, Salvador Sinanci, drove his car down the road, and it connects Syracuse to the Sicilian coast, right? So he's on the edge of the coastline. His wife stood by him, and the only light illuminating in the darkness was one from the car headlights, and it was pretty dark out there, right? So it said suddenly the car headlights illuminated a strange figure about 25 meters from the vehicle. In other words, something was walking towards them. The figure was about 1 meter tall, which is about, 2 feet or so? 3 feet? She wore a fair, bright red-orange jumpsuit that seemed to reflect the headlights on her head. The figure carried something similar to a helmet made of transparent material, which seemed to protect her face. So they knew it was a female of some sort, right? Cianci and his wife were petrified with fear. Unable to take their eyes away from the mysterious figure, the transparent helmet covered the creature's face, making it impossible to see the facial features. So as the car approached the a stranger leaped from the side of the road into the center, raising its arms in the way to suggest that it was trying to stop the vehicle. CE completely terrified and reacted. He started accelerating the car, trying to flee the scene as quickly as possible, leaving the mysterious figure behind. The day after the encounter, ufologists Frank Bertonelli and Alfredo Sicilia conducted through the investigation of the site made an intriguing discovery. In a field near the meeting site, they found a flattened or burned circular area about 30 meters in diameter. Despite the heavy rains, and the grass and soil had showed up of intense burning, right? So it was still there even after it had rained. So in addition to a short distance from the burning zone, the investigators discovered circle traces approximately 10 centimeters in diameter and 15 centimeters in width. Those tracks to have been pronounced by some kind of round footwear, raising even more questions about the nature of the encounter. So, what they investigated, they pretty much figured out that, by the looks of it, that the craft landed in a field by there. And it left, of course, the indentions and the marks and the burn marks of whatever craft it was. Because usually an extraterrestrial craft, when it lands on the ground, and it usually does that, right? It always leaves some kind of radioactive burns or some kind of imprint, round burn imprint, even where the feet or a tripod sort of feet lay, right? And they actually put that story in a book called The Humanoid Encounters of 1960 to 1964, The Others Among Us. So, what that's pretty much telling you is a lot of these stories from the early years in the 1960s, that things were happening. People didn't have cell phones back then, right? So these were like encounters, especially in Sicily around that time. I believe you barely had a landline, right? So how do they try to explain that to people of exactly what they saw? And the only way they could was just to call a ufologist or somebody that was investigating those kind of mysterious incidences, right? So, and that's the hardest part, people, and I'm sure people thought they were nuts and crazy because they're explaining that somebody in a little jumpsuit with a little bubble helmet, and then all of a sudden, after they left the next morning, they find this burn mark in the field, this tripod, circular marks on the ground, which indicates a strong indication that some kind of craft did land there, right? And why was this little extraterrestrial being, because it was short, walking on the road, like trying to get their attention? In other words, what we have now these days, I guess, we don't see that very much as far as the stories now, right? Like people don't talk about like, oh yeah, I was driving and I was, nice, and I was in this field in the middle of the night, and something started walking up to me wearing this kind of, you don't hear those kind of stories now these days. And I think to me that the extraterrestrial or whatever it is, or whatever comes into our atmosphere and decides to land and decide to check out, to check out whatever's there, how do you explain that? And you're not going to see that. You're not going to see the stories of that coming out exactly of what you used to hear back in the 60s and the 50s and the 70s, right? They told it all. They didn't know, And I believe the explanations are just kind of speak for themselves at times, to where it's either believe me or you don't, right? Now, if that was you, what would you have done, right? Would you have stopped and asked or helped or try to communicate with it? But remember, this is 1960. They weren't used to seeing anything like that. So it's just a scary thing for them back then. And you coulda, shoulda, woulda, but what would you have done? Would you have stopped, pulled over, and just checked it out? I'm sure everybody grabs their phone now these days with anything. I mean, you see a fight break out or somebody just acting crazy or doing something crazy, like 20,000 phones come out, right? So basically, I think that's probably what would happen. And maybe these extraterrestrials don't want to be seen that way, right? Because they know we all have the capability of transmitting images worldwide, right? So maybe they just don't want that much attention. And I think that's probably what's happening, right? With that. And if they would have had a CE5 connection with this thing, there's a lot of things that go with it, right? You have meditation, consciousness expansions, you have visualizations, you have you get the light and the sound signals become more intense, right? You have more remote viewing, consciousness projection, you have all that. You have data collections and your brain just kind of, you turn into sort of like a genius overnight. Put it to you that way. And believe you and me, I mean, I would have probably stopped and got a closer look. That's just me. Now, if it was one of them ugly ones or reptilians or whatever, nope, I ain't staying for that one. But if it's something in a suit with the bubble and, like a space suit, it means that it's having issues breathing, because it still had the helmet on, which suggests that whatever it was does not breathe very well in our atmosphere. You got to remember that a lot of these extraterrestrials or extraterrestrial beings, whatever planets they come from, a lot of people that go inside of these UFOs always talk about how humid and how dense the air is and how it's hard to breathe in there, right? So it's probably vice versa for them when they're here. It's like our air is too much for them. It's like it's too much oxygen, right? They're used to a different kind of atmosphere, more humid, more sticky, more wet. That's exactly what those kind of extraterrestrials go through. But I've even heard of the Palladian looking ones, the 6-foot blondes, the male and female, that they still have helmets on. So maybe they come from off planet, a different planet somewhere, in our star system or a different universe, to where they breathe a different kind of air, right? Maybe a little bit different. It's just like people that live way up in the Alps. And then we try to go, they live up there all their life. We go up there and we're having a hard time breathing, right? And we have to come back down because it's hard to breathe. We're passing out, but they're just fine. So your body acclimates to that sort of atmosphere, right? So they probably just use that for their own protection, just like us. We do the same thing when we go to a different planet, or let's just say we went to the moon, supposedly. That one still kind of throws me. There's some off and on there, man. Some of it looks real, some of it don't. I think we did land there. I just think that it was just maybe possibly one that went there and the rest kind of, I don't know. They kind of just threw people for a loop. It was just some crazy stuff happening there. There's a lot of conflicting evidence on that moon landing and a few different ones. And it goes either way. And I'm not so much of a conspiracy theorist at all, but it kind of throws you when you see a lot of that stuff out there, right? And of course, Buzz Aldrin and all those guys, they would get PO'd when you would tell them stuff like that, and they'd get into fist fights. So, hey, maybe they're the ones that actually are the ones that went, right, and landed, and everything else was just kind of bull crap, right? But I'm just signifying the oxygen levels and how hard it is possibly for us humans or anybody else to breathe. in that situation, right? And that was a story there in Sicily, right? And it's just that's just a small little farm area, small town out there close by the coast. They're probably just having out a picnic during the day, and then lo and behold, this happens to them in the middle of the night, right? Yeah, it could really throw you or anybody for a loop at that point. And I think that was just a random thing that happened. They just happened to be at the right place at the right time, but wrong people. And that's what we talked about in the on my interview there in Oregon, right? On that radio station, was that some people are chosen to be walked up to. Some people are chosen to be talked to. Some people are chosen to be on board craft. Some people are chosen to be on board craft and go off world with them. Some people are chosen to do that, not everybody. And it all depends on you, what kind of person you are. And that's what they look at. They're not going to pick up a violent person. That's for sure. Because they know that something bad's going to come about it, right? So, and some people have the fight or flight, mentality, right? And it could be. I mean, if you see something, you're getting forced to do something you don't want to do, it's going to be fight or flight. That's exactly how people are going to react. I mean, I would probably react the same way if I was being forced in a situation that I wasn't going to be in, right? That's just a normal humanistic a reaction, really, in reality. It happens to everybody, everything. And anything that breathes air, really, in reality. All animals do it, right? When they're going to distress or they're attacked by another animal, what do? Fight or flight. It's exactly the same thing. They're fighting for their lives. And if you happen to come across a extraterrestrial that doesn't have any bad intentions or doing anything bad like that to you, then you might just wholeheartedly walk in with them like Betty and Barney Hill and have conversations with them. Hey, you never know. The possibilities are endless when it comes to things like that. But what do I know? I've only had like 15 visual close encounters. I'm not here. Look, it's like I tell everybody, I'm not the person that gives you all the advice, and especially if you're like a child psychologist and you have no children, right? I'm not that guy. I've had a lot of experiences, right, to where I can tell you exactly, what's on my mind and what I think exactly is happening. Yeah. I've lived it. I've seen it. I've experienced it. And it's just one of those things that we really, really have to go through, right? Some of us, not everybody. All right, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast as we talked about Sicily, 1960. Yeah. Great story. It was a small story, but it was a good one, right? Hope you guys learned a little bit about, CE1 through CE5 and, just had a little bit of, just, hey, man, I want to read that book. Yeah. Frequencies of Contact, CE5. You can download it on your Kindle. Go check it out there. Go check out the middle films, right? Middle Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3 is on Amazon Prime. Yes, it is. Go check it out. Give me a thumbs up. Share that film with as many people as you can. You can watch it for free on Fossum TV as well. Go check it out there, all right? Or even on Tubi TV. You can see it there as well, all right? So, don't forget, listen to us on all these audio platforms. Hello? Deezer, Castbox, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. I love iHeartRadio. I don't know about you. I love iHeartRadio and Spotify. I listen to a lot of my stuff on those, man, and those are like my favorite go-tos. I love them because of their different content, and you get to hear like radio stations too, right? I love the old radio stations, but anyway, that's just my opinion. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. Catch us on all these platforms. Give us a thumbs up. Give me hearts, likes. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go check out our films on there. We have a few of them on there as well. Don't forget Skylight TV. It's still for free. Go check it out on Facebook. Go look for it. It's free web TV. I put up a lot of new movies, man. Go check them out there on Skylight 1. All right, until next time, you guys have yourselves a good day. Have yourselves a good evening. And have yourselves a good night.